explains what's going on in the field, talks about the plays, analyzes the strengths and weaknesses of the players. That's more what a book review is. It includes the play-by-play. You can't do the commentary unless you've got the play-by-play. So you're going to have some summary, we'll see, in the book review. But the review is the commentary, the analysis, the understanding of what the author is trying to do, and then an evaluation of that. So a book review, here are some of the elements of a good book review that we'll talk about. Number one, sorry, it's a little small writing. Identify the author's purpose for writing. We'll talk about that. Number two, identify the author's thesis. And it's important to distinguish between the two. A lot of book reviews I read cite the author's purpose as his thesis, and we'll talk about the difference. Number three, identify the arguments used in support of the thesis by the author. Four, evaluate the arguments and not just give an unfounded assessment of the arguments, but actually support your analysis. Okay, this is weak or this is strong because, and give some thoughtful interaction. And finally, then draw conclusions about the book's usefulness and impact. Okay, because of all of that, who would best read this book? What is the best use of this book? I'm going to bullet point these, and we'll talk about specifically some of these here in a moment. What is the general subject matter? Obviously, should be easy to summarize. What is the theme? So now we're narrowing from the general subject matter to the theme. What is the purpose of the book? Why is he writing it? Is he responding to someone else? Does he think there's a problem out there with something? Why is he writing the book? Then, what is the main thesis? And by thesis, we'll talk about it in a moment, we mean his primary argument. What is this author trying to prove, disprove, explain, argue, analyze, etc. And again, I want to emphasize there's a difference between purpose and thesis. Okay, and I'll highlight that again in a moment. And then, what are the primary arguments used in support of the thesis? So here's his argument. And here's a list of 7, 10, 15 arguments and sub-arguments that he uses in this document to support his primary thesis. Or the secondary arguments. Okay, so there's the list. I want to give you a real-life example of putting this into practice. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, I've got to use a real-life example, but I want to use a book everybody's familiar with. I was thinking, what book could I use that everybody is familiar with? And I came up with Green Eggs and Ham.
Now you're talking.
Okay, so I'm going to show you, real life, how to do a book review of Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. Anybody not familiar with this book? Couple. Most of you are. And we'll do a summary here in a moment. Okay, so this is obviously silly, but I just want to show you all the elements and a basic progression through reading and doing the book review. Okay, so Green Eggs and Ham. Here we go. Author. I looked this up on Wikipedia. Okay, good place to start. I wouldn't cite it. You can't trust it implicitly, but sometimes it's just a good place to get some basic information. The author is Theodore Seuss Geisel, a.k.a. Dr. Seuss. I looked at some information on him, and I found this statement. Again, information about the author and about his context will help you interpret the book, even something as simple as Green Eggs and Ham. I found this statement, which I think is interesting. He was a perfectionist. he would sometimes spend up to a year on a book. Really? Well, what does that tell you about him? He wasn't just writing a simple children's book. He had a purpose behind it. It took him a year to write it. Okay? It wasn't uncommon for him to throw out 95% of his material, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Interesting background information. I found this interesting, which again, as we'll see, I think plays into this book. He drew political cartoons that often had deeper meaning to even what he wrote for children. I don't know what I meant there, but anyway. In other words, he wrote cartoons that had deeper meaning, which gives a possible indication that his children's writing, even a silly story, perhaps had deeper meaning. Okay, here's a summary of the book. Sam tries to convince his friend to eat green eggs and ham. His friend refuses, but after much persistence, the friend tries the dish and finds that he likes it. Basic summary. Okay, so question. What is the thesis? Okay, those of you who know green eggs and ham, what's the thesis of the book? Persistence. Possibly.
If you try it, you might like it.
If you try it, you might like it. Possibly. Okay, here are some possible theses, and I'm listing these out of experience of what I see students put as the thesis to show you, what to avoid. Green eggs and ham are good. Okay, at a basic level, well, that's the thesis. Is that really the thesis, though? How about there are many possible places to eat green eggs and ham? Okay, again, a very surface analysis of the thesis of the book. You should try green eggs and ham. Okay, we're getting a little closer, but the question is that really the point? Okay, and that's another example of where I see a lot of students who still are sort of surface in what they discern as the thesis, but sometimes you're going to have to get deeper. And this is a perfect book of a perfect example of a book with an unstated thesis. If you're just looking for a thesis that's stated, you might do one of these. But I would suggest the thesis is, try new things because you might just like them. That's never stated as such in the book. Okay, obviously, silly example. All right, finally, we're done here after this. Here is the book review I wrote for Dr. Seuss Theological Journal. Okay. But I just want to read. I want to read this and show you all the pertinent points of our book review. Okay. So I've got my title. I've got my bibliographical information there. It's a long book, 62 pages. Wow. Okay. So I start with a provocative quote that grips my audience's attention. Try them and you may, I say. In Dr. Seuss's clever and witty way, Theodore S. Geisel, author of many children's popular and popular and successful children's books, motivates children to be open to trying new things because they just might like them. I've already stated the thesis. I've given background information, provocative quote, background information, context, and thesis, all in 2 sentences. It'll probably be a little more in a substantial book, but it doesn't have to be much more. Here's my summary. In Geisel's engaging book, Green Eggs and Ham, a character named Sam I Am tries to convince his friend to try a dish called green eggs and ham, though his friend is very resistant to the idea, as he expresses in the above quote. Finally, his friend tries it and discovers that he actually likes this strange dish. Here is my analysis of the arguments. Geisel presses home his point to children in his book through several means. First, he reveals the stubbornness of Sam's friend by having him refuse the dish no matter what the environment or circumstances. In a house, and by the way, here is the appropriate way to include page numbers. You like that cool laser pointer? In parentheses, before the punctuation, either comma or period, if you have a quote, like here, the quote goes before the citation and then the ending punctuation after. Okay, we see a lot of mistakes on that. Anyway, in a house, page 19, on a train, 33, on a boat, 44, etc. The fact that he insists that he does not like the dish despite the persistence of Sam clearly illustrates his stubbornness. Second, Geisel demonstrates the need to try new things through the persistence of Sam, which may be a thesis as well. Obviously, Sam is convinced that his friend will like the meal if he simply tries it, and therefore he attempts to motivate his friend to try it by simply changing the circumstances. Third, Geisel shows that new things can be pleasant by making his character express gratitude to Sam when he finds that he indeed likes the dish. And here's an example of using a quote to support what I'm talking about. I do so like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam I am. Okay, here is my analysis of his arguments. The point of green eggs and ham is convincing to children who might otherwise neglect trying new things. The friend's stubbornness is clearly portrayed, revealing the futility of rejecting new things. The only potential weakness to the goal of the book is the fact that children reading a silly story may not even recognize the underlying thesis. And then here is my conclusion. Green Eggs and Ham is an enjoyable children's book written using a total of only 50 words, none of them exceeding 5 letters except for the word anywhere, page 16. Thus, it is a fitting work for young children to both learn to read and gain an important life's lesson. Okay, silly exercise, but all of the elements are there. Okay, and what I would expect from a good